Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. If you had trouble signing on today, I really apologize. The wrong link went out to register and the right link came in this morning. So I do apologize for that mistake there. We have Michelle Atkinson today. She's going to give us a great talk about stormwater ponds. So if you live in an HOA, you live on a stormwater pond. If you are somebody who takes care of a stormwater pond, this is the webinar for you for sure. So we'll give it, we've got 2 more minutes and then we'll start on time. We'll let a couple more people come in. You know, so we'll wait for just a few more minutes. Does anybody want to tell me where they're from? Put it in the chat if you would. Longwood. Great. And Orlando, Monroe, Sun City Center, St. Petersburg. Oh, Alachua. I saw you, Anne. St. Lucie, Nokomis. We've got them from all over today. I'm really glad you could be here with us today. Like I said, it's going to be a great talk. If you have questions about your stormwater pond, we'll have time for questions after. And Michelle is great and a real professional. She's very knowledgeable about this, so you'll get a really good answer. Yes, I think I just heard is Fort Lauderdale the new Atlantis? Just kidding. I feel for you guys down there getting all that rain. I hope everybody's okay. Well, it is 11 o'clock. So I will go ahead and start my intro here. Hello and welcome to the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program's Homeowner Webinar Series, a series given every 3rd Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. Eastern. My name is Jen Marvin, and I'm the Florida Yards and Neighborhoods Statewide Coordinator. Today we have Michelle Atkinson speaking with us about stormwater ponds. First, I'd like to mention a new initiative that we have. It's called the Florida Friendly Pledge. This is a pledge, you know, if you don't feel like you're ready for your landscape to get recognized quite yet, but you still want to do something, this is a smaller pledge to the environment. We ask you to choose from, you know, any number of behaviors, click the button, you know, send it in, and you know, we'll check back with you later on in the year to see if you actually did that behavior throughout the last 6 months. But it's a good way to feel like you're participating in something that is, you know, helping Florida's natural resources and doing something with the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. So if you'd like to participate in the pledge, go to floridafriendlylandscaping.com and you'll see a button at the top that says sign the pledge. We do not share any addresses or any information with anybody else but us. So you can, and even you'll see a map on there. We don't put your address on the map. If you scroll in far enough, you'll see that the dot disappears as soon as we get close to being able to see where it is in a neighborhood. So try taking a pledge and see how you do for 6 months. So let's get back to the webinar. Your microphones have been muted. If you have questions, please type them in the chat box and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. Please stick around until the end to take the exit survey. It helps me give you the kind of programming that you like and lets us know how we're doing. Our next presentation will be on May 16th at 11 a.m. Eastern on ethnobotany, which is humans' historical use of, I believe it'll be Florida plants. You know, how different plants in the environment have benefited humans throughout history. So that will be a really interesting presentation. So I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Michelle Atkinson has been working with the University of Florida researchers and graduate students in communities looking at stormwater ponds for over 10 years. Some of the research topics including strategies to encourage adoption of stormwater pond best management practices by homeowners, best management practices for maintaining stormwater pond buffer zones for pond and landscape professionals, Florida-friendly plant and stormwater pond shorelines, and water quality changes from buffer and aquatic plantings in and around stormwater ponds. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Michelle Atkinson.
Thanks,
Michelle,
Jen.
welcome.
Thanks for the warm welcome. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all of y'all tuning in today. As Jen said, I'm Michelle. I'm in Manatee County, and we found a need here probably 12 or 15 years ago. A lot of homeowners were having some problems with their ponds. And so we started getting some researchers involved, and it has grown from there. So we're going to talk about a lot of that today. Let me get to where I can click on my presentation and move it forward. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the big dupe that's out there, and that is most Floridians do not live on a lake. It's a stormwater pond. There are some parts of Florida that do have many lakes in the center of the state in Polk County, that area. But most of what is sold as lakefront property in the highly developed areas around the coastlines is not really lakes, it's stormwater ponds. So we need to talk about that. These lots are sold at a higher value because they're sold as lakefront or waterfront, and people don't understand the function and purpose of these bodies of water when they move here, and they expect something totally different than what they can do in their backyard. So what is a stormwater pond? Well, it's a man-made feature. It's not naturally occurring. It could have been a wet area that was present on site prior to development, but it is man-made. Again, they're often mistaken for lakes. Everybody wants that. Well, I've got a picture. Here we go. Everybody wants this look in their backyard. Green grass to blue water. That's what they're looking for. And unfortunately, these cannot do this for you because they have a different function that we're going to talk about. So we need to get this picture out of our minds and out of our heads and start getting used to a different picture. So why do we have stormwater ponds? Well, back in the 80s, the water management districts started making developments capture their stormwater on site and treating it prior to it moving on to a natural body of water. So what does that mean? When you develop a piece of land as a developer, so not necessarily one lot, but when you have multiple lots, you have to collect a good amount of stormwater. I can't say all of it because in the case of Fort Lauderdale, there was no way to capture all of that stormwater on site. But a good amount of it has to be captured on site, treated before it moves on. So how does that happen? In our communities, we have roads and homes and all kinds of things that shed water when it rains. They're called impervious or hard surfaces. and they all flow water. They often pick up pollution as they're flowing. So grass clippings, fertilizer, dog poop, oil, trash, gasoline, just all kinds of stuff ends up in this water. And as you can see in number 1 in the picture, it flows from these surfaces, and it usually is captured in a stormwater system, a stormwater grate, or gosh, why can't I think of words today? But anyway, it's caught in the roadside stormwater catchments, and then it is piped into a stormwater pond. Now, in the chat, please answer this question. From where it's collected in the road, in that stormwater catchment, to where it goes into the pond. So from the road to the pond, is there any treatment on that water? Any filter? Oh, you guys are smart. Okay. You guys are smart. Somebody did say sometimes. That could be accurate. Yes. There are some green infrastructure type things out there that our filtration systems. They require a lot of maintenance because, as you know, a lot of things end up in that area. And I'm going to show you pictures of some of those things that end up in that area. And so if you have a filter there, that filter has to be cleaned off. And so that increases the maintenance of these areas. So typically you're going to find nothing. It's an open grate into an open pipe that openly flows into the pond. And so all of those nutrients and grass clippings, oil, whatever, goes into that pond. And the concept is it's going to settle down. It's going to settle down to the bottom of the pond. Clean water will be up at the top of the pond. And as you get more water flow in, the clean water will flow out and into our natural bodies of water. So that's what you see, 3, 4, sometimes there's 2 ponds to get right together. Sometimes there's multiple ponds in a chain of treatment in a community. Your pond can go from 1 to 2. I've seen as many as 8 ponds connected prior to it flowing out into a natural body of water. But then eventually it's released somewhere. In our area, that's creeks, rivers, bays, the Gulf of Mexico. So here's just another example of how it comes in. So it comes in, it can flow in from the land. So if you border a pond, if your home is on a pond, it can flow right in from your land. But typically the majority of water is coming in from those pipes, those inlet pipes, from the conveyances all throughout the community. And then there's the outflow pipe. And in this case, that's not typically what we see. It's more elevated. So it's up at the top, and it's a spillover. That is what we typically see now, are the spillovers. So what should homeowners associations be talking about in the way of ponds? So when the Water Management District said this is the way that we're going to develop and started making developers responsible for installing these ponds and engineers responsible for doing the math to see how big the pond needed to be for the community, they said somebody has to be responsible for this pond in perpetuity. So forever and ever. So because somebody had to be responsible, then that fell to an HOA type situation. And so in the late 80s, early 90s became the time of the HOAs. A lot of HOAs were put in largely for this reason, because somebody had to be responsible for the pond and for the permitting of that pond. So what should the HOA be talking about? Because they are the ones responsible for these ponds. They need to be talking about the upkeep and maintenance, the labor and expenses for this upkeep, and permitting. So let's talk about some of these. There is lots of information for us out on the web, and I'm going to pull out of here and go to the website so we can see how this works. So at floridawaterpermits.com, I'm going to click on Southwest Florida because that's where I'm at. I'm familiar with their page. So when I click on that, it takes me to their permitting page. I come down to the environmental resources permits, and over here to the map. I like the map view just because I can drive my mouse where I want to go. Okay, so it brings you to this kind of a view. And you can zoom in on the area that you're interested in. So I, for time's sake, have already zoomed in on one area and clicked on it. So you just zoom in to the area, you click on the boundaries in the parcel, and it brings up something that looks like this. It tells you about the area. So in this case, it's Heritage Harbor. And when I scroll down, it gives me more information. Okay, so then I go to Documents. Up at the tabs here, lots of information. You can get very familiar with everything on this page, but I'm interested in the documents. And it's going to show me everything about this permit. It's going to show the application, the plans. Every time the permit's been renewed, it'll be in there. So I'm going to click on Permitted Plans. And I've already done this just because it takes a while for it to load. So I went ahead and did that earlier. And it shows the plans of this community. And here's a stormwater pond right here. And it's showing me the conveyances. So I've got a drain here and probably a road drain here that all flow into the pond, another one flowing in. This one looks like it's flowing out into this pond. It's a treatment chain going pond to pond. If I zoom in, there we go. You can say if I zoom in, and then scroll down here. I don't know if you can see the writing right here under the LG4. It says NWL, which is the normal water line, is 6.5 feet. The deep water line, or the high water line is 7.65. If you go to the top of bank, it's 8.65. So there's a lot of information contained here. And when somebody's doing a permit, they're coming out, they're checking these things, they're making sure that the depth is similar to what it was originally supposed to be. They're looking at these conveyance systems to make sure they're clear and in good repair. If they're damaged, then that gets reported. So let's go back to the presentation, but you could do this for your area. All the water management districts put these out there for you to have access to. Okay, something else HOAs need to be talking about: budgets. I know that's an ugly word. And here's my pond full of money right here in my picture. So ponds do need regular maintenance and long-term maintenance. When ponds are engineered, they were originally expected to have a life of 20 to 30 years. So what does that mean? Well, after 20 to 30 years, they thought that there would be enough pollutants built up in the bottom in the sediment that it would have to be dredged in order for it to function properly again. We've learned that there's a lot of things that can influence that pond life, but regular maintenance is one of the things that can influence that pond life. The HOA needs to be talking about this regular maintenance. That's your kind of day-to-day maintenance. Most HOAs have some kind of a pond management company that comes in and treats for invasive plants. They may treat for algae if algae is present in the pond. We do have a program called the Florida Friendly Ponds Certification Program, and it is for maintenance folks. So something to ask your company is, are they certified with Florida Friendly Ponds? Because that is a now statewide certification program. It's been offered for a couple of years. It originally came out as Healthy Ponds. So if they say I'm certified in Healthy Ponds, it now is the same thing. We changed the name. So also with the budget, are we planning on the long-term expenses like dredging? Ponds do have that life expectancy, and this can vary, depending on how we're maintaining it. We're going to talk more about that as we move through the presentation. But 20 to 30 years is what was expected, and dredging's not cheap. So if there's not funds being put aside in the HOA budget, then there could be a big surprise when we get to that time period. And what about shoreline restoration? If there are not things in place to prevent shoreline erosion, then the shorelines erode. It's a very bad problem. That's why I get called out in most cases, is because of the erosion on the shorelines of these ponds. And the cost to restore that can be very expensive. So in a minor case where they're just, bringing in minor materials, it could be $50, and we're talking a linear foot. So for every foot around the pond, to bring in the lower grade materials, it could be $50 a foot. It can go up to $500 a foot when you're talking about having to bring in big equipment because you can't get them between the houses. So they've got to figure out other ways to get equipment back there. Bringing in the materials. If you have to bring in soil, sometimes you can pull the soil or the sediment out of the pond and use that. Sometimes it has to be trucked in. So it can get very expensive very fast. So everything you can do to prevent erosion around these ponds should be done. But that becomes a challenge sometimes, and we'll talk about why. So I would highly encourage every homeowners association to have a stormwater pond committee. They have lots to talk about in stormwater committees. So things that they could be talking about would be the regular maintenance, looking at the contractors. Often we evaluate contracts, both landscape and pond maintenance, on cost alone. We all know how to evaluate on cost, right? But who knows how to evaluate on quality of work? We need to be looking at experience, calling the communities that they're currently working in, seeing what they have to say about these contractors, asking them questions about best management practices and seeing if they understand some of those things. We can help you with that. We have resources through the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. We also offer talks a lot of times throughout the state on these types of issues. So regular maintenance contracts is definitely something that the pond maintenance committee should be talking about, but also long-term maintenance and trying to encourage those budget, the set aside for the budget to cover those. Ways to reduce erosion in your community specifically, ways to improve pond performance. And one of the ways to do that is identifying the pollutants that are in the pond and how do we stop them from getting in there. And we're going to cover that today too. Of course, the budget needs, the long-term plans, the budgets for the long-term plans, and then the permit renewals. Permits are issued when you get a pond and they have to be renewed. It varies. I've heard from 3 to 5 years as to when you need to renew that permit. A third-party engineer comes out. It's not the water management district that comes out. It is you contract with an engineer. They come out, look at your pond, look at those conveyance systems, and then they fill out the paperwork to renew the permit. So that needs to be done. So let's go in a little more depth of what these committees can be talking about. So, we talked about how the nutrients can get in the water from the roads and from the landscapes. And so once they're in the water, what happens? Well, especially the nutrients, if we have nitrogen and phosphorus headed into our stormwater ponds, that's what plants need to grow. It's also what algae needs to grow, right? So if we have a lot of those things in our ponds, we can grow algae. And a little bit of algae is not a problem. A little bit of algae actually is helping with that nitrogen cycling and can do beneficial things for the ponds. But we can get out of control and out of balance pretty quickly, and it can get stinky. It can look very bad. We can have fish kills. So we want to keep that under control so we don't have this situation. I just want to also say that that's not the only reason we have fish kills. Something that happens out just in our environment is that when we have ponds, we have what we call layers or stratifications in the pond. So we have up at the top on a day like today, when the sun's shining, the water's going to be warmer up here, and down at the bottom, it's going to be cooler. And in the fall, it's going to flip, right? We're going to have, because we've been all summer with warm water, the water at the bottom is going to be warm. The water up at the top is going to cool down. And so when we have these temperature changes, or we have like a real heavy rain event that causes the temperature to change on the water, it can cause the pond to do what we call a flip. The water becomes more dense on the top than it is at the bottom, and so it will flip over. And when that happens, there's not as much oxygen available on the top layer, and so the fish end up dying. Unfortunately, it often happens right after your pond guy's been there, and so all the homeowners will tell you that they sprayed something in that pond and caused a fish kill. Usually that's coincidental. Very often it is, especially, in the temperature changing times, the result of a pond flip. But it can also be the result of excessive algae growth. So we need to, be mindful of that. Something else, and that is my actual picture when I was out pulling a pond sample one day. Something else that we need to be careful of is, cleaning up after our pets. That bacteria and other pathogens can get in the water as well as nitrogen. One of our pond researchers, Dr. Mary Lusk, was doing some research, and she was calling it a hot spot in the pond. So they would test all around the edges of the pond to look at the nitrogen, and there was this one spot that just the nitrogen was really, really high, and they started investigating up into the watershed to see where that was coming from. And there was a backyard with 2 big Labradors in it, and so they found very quickly where that source of nitrogen was coming from. So type in the chat, is this amount of algae, do you think it's good or do you think it's bad? What's your thoughts? So we have a mixed bunch here. Very mixed bunch. Well, that's good. So aesthetically, these homes, and this is a community called Lakewood Ranch. It's a huge community that the homes were sold as lakefront property. And you can see that they have lots of windows in the back of the homes. And if you were to go inside those homes all look out over that pond, right? So if you're in the kitchen fixing dinner, you see over the pond. If you're in your bedroom, you see over the pond. If you're in your pool, back porch, you see over the pond. And so when there's algae back there, it really upsets them, very much so. So I say, this isn't a bad amount of algae. It's doing a function for the pond. But there's something that we could do to hide this algae that the homeowners wouldn't necessarily see it, and it wouldn't upset them as much. And that is, we could use some plants along the edge of this pond, and the algae could actually reside in those plants, and it wouldn't be as noticeable. You would still see the surface water. What folks say in the research is you see the reflection of the trees in the water. They like to see that. They like to see that kind of open surface water. They like it to have a neat appearance. They don't want it to look weedy and messy. But if we can attain those things, then homeowners tend to adopt the idea of putting in plants. And then we could still have a little bit of algae in there that can do a good function of helping to remove some of that nitrogen out of the pond. But oftentimes when plants are behind folks' homes, they feel like it's weedy or swampy looking, and they try to remove them. And so I get asked a lot of times, can I remove the weeds out from my pond? I was at a home yesterday. She wanted to mow the littoral shelf behind her house. And so unfortunately, these plants are doing a huge service and a benefit to that pond, and we would like to keep them in there. We would recommend removal of any invasive plant material, but there are a number of very good plants that grow along the water's edge. Now we can improve the appearance, and I have lots of pictures to show you of how we can accomplish this. So maybe the plant selection needs to be looked at, but plants do a great service. And so we definitely want to keep them in place. Our pond permits have language in them that talks about plants. Unfortunately, they're just not monitoring for that anymore. The language is still there, but it's not being addressed on a large basis. So this is one of the ponds I went out to. You can see there's no plants present in the water or on the shoreline. And you can see these, what I call cliffs, back here up by the trees all around the pond. And what happens is, and if you can see my picture, you have your bank here, and you have your water that even on a mild day has some wave action. It wasn't windy this day, and you can see the waves there. So those waves hit that bank, that sandy soil, and it causes it to erode a little bit and erode a little bit. And you end up with banks that look like this. And then eventually that just sloughs off and it starts all over again. And eventually you have very wide ponds. Again, yesterday I was at a place that it had eroded back to the irrigation system in the homeowner's yard. There was supposed to be 15 feet between the homeowner lot line and the pond, but it had eroded back the 15 feet. So over time, that's what happens. It just keeps eroding and getting bigger and bigger. So there's things that we can do to prevent this. Here's another picture of the cliffing, you know, and that marching back of the shoreline that can happen. Here's one. This is a power pole in the in the pond, and I can guarantee that that was not in the pond when it was originally built. They would not put power poles in ponds. So that shoreline has eroded back. Not only that, this is a very steep cliff right here, and this is a villa type situation. There's folks that are maybe not as stable walking around in their backyards, and if they were to fall in here, I don't believe that they could get out. So that then becomes, you know, it could become a liability, and it's definitely a dangerous situation. So we need to make sure that we have, you know, a nice slope, and our water management district actually has language on that as well. Again, it's not often monitored. Here's a nice situation that every homeowner loves to see when your pond looks like this. Yes, that is all algae, but look right here what is on top of the algae. Can you see that? What is that stuff all speckled on top of the algae? Fill it in your chat. You got it. Grass clippings. So they're mowing right up to the edge of that pond, and the grass clippings are getting in that pond. So when we fertilize, or even when we don't fertilize, what goes up into the grass is nitrogen and phosphorus. That's what it needs to grow. So that's what's present in each one of those grass blades. So when we cut our grass, there is like little bits of nitrogen and phosphorus or fertilizer in every grass clipping. So when it ends up in the pond, it feeds the algae in the pond. It's like putting some fertilizer in your pond. So this is a horrible situation. This is not a good amount of algae. I want to be clear on that. This is out of balance. We would definitely recommend some solutions to this algae problem. Here's another one. You can see the clipping in the front, but I wanted to show you in the back where there's plants. Look at the edge. I think, do I have the line? Nope, I don't have the line on this one. So you can see here, it's cliff, cliff, cliff. And then all of a sudden, oh, we have some shoreline present and not such a steep cliff there. And that's what plants can do. So again, we have that shoreline, we have the wave action, but now I'm going to put some plants up here in front of my shoreline. And when the wave goes to hit the shoreline, the energy gets diffused. And so it's very minimal disturbance to the shoreline, if any at all, because that plant is going to take care of that for us. So aquatic plants, they help to put oxygen into the water. They create habitats for the invertebrates, which then feed the vertebrates like our fish and our birds. And it becomes to bringing in more species and getting to be an ecosystem. Now, I said up front, these are man-made systems. They are not natural systems, but our goal is to try to mimic a natural system as best we can and create an ecosystem in there so we can get the benefits of the ecosystem. You know, the birds can help stir things up. The fish can help stir things up and allow some of that cycling to happen. So there's lots of benefits for all of this. Plants can invite those folks in. If you have the pond, let me go, sorry, that one. If you have this pond and you have fish in it, how long do you think the fish will last? This happens quite a lot. People will stock these ponds that look just like this and say, we had to pay $25 a fish to stock our pond. And within 3 weeks, they were gone. Well, why were they gone? there's nothing for them to hide in. There's no place for them to hide. So for birds, that's like fish in a barrel, right? They can very easily see them and pick them off. Okay. So we also know that the vegetated shorelines can help with our water quality because they can help take up some of the nutrients that are in there, and they can help trap sediment. So as the land is flowing water off of it, shedding water off of it, it carries sediment, and that sediment can actually get trapped behind the plants and start recreating some of that shoreline. And I've seen that happen here locally. I gave a gentleman some plants from our demonstration garden to demonstrate to his community what it can look like. And it's been 2 years, and he says he's seeing that shoreline actually start to rebuild because of that flow of the sediment coming off the land is getting trapped by those plants and then building it back up. So the way that the permits read is that we're supposed to have a littoral shelf in our plants, and some people call it littoral, and that's fine. It's littoral, littoral, however you would like to say it. So in our pond, 30% of the pond is supposed to have this shelf. And this is a low area that is supposed to be for plants to be able to grow on. Of that 30%, 85% of the area is supposed to have vegetation. That's how the permits were written, are still written. Unfortunately, it's not being enforced. But at any time, they could come back and say, this is what the language in the permit is, so we need to do this. They've known that plants help with this, with pollution and filtration. And so that's why it was originally established. It also creates habitat for wildlife, which is a benefit in a lot of ways. So this is what we would call a full littoral shelf planting, meaning there's in the forefront of the picture, there's a bit of a bigger shelf, but then all the way around the pond, they've taken the shallow areas and planted it. And these are all aquatic plants. So this is a pretty dense planting, but I want you to note a couple of things. One is the placement of the houses. There is quite a slope from the home to the pond. So even if these plants grow up to be 3 to 4 feet tall, they're still not going to impede the view out of those windows or the back porches of those homes. They can still see over them and see that surface water, which is what folks are typically telling us that they want to see. They want to see that reflection of the trees and the clouds, the sky and the water. So that still provides that, but it is still maintaining that shoreline, helping to reduce erosion. So prevention is always the key to better water quality. It's also a better key to erosion. The 9 principles of Florida-friendly landscaping are very helpful with stormwater ponds. So if you attend this, you probably know many of these. I'm not going to read each one, but there are 9 principles that are put in place because they make sense. But one of them is, of course, right plant, right place. It's the #1 principle because it's the most important. And so when you find the right place for the right plant, it doesn't require as much water, fertilizer, or pesticide, which is going to be helpful to our pond. We're going to group plants together, use ground covers instead of turf if we can, to lower the amount of water that needs to be utilized on site. If turf continues to fail in a location, we use something else. Water efficiently is something else that's very, very important to stormwater ponds, and people don't realize this one a lot. So what's wrong in this photo? What's happening here? Where's that water going to go? Yeah, runoff. It's watering the street. So all of the gas, oil, sediment, whatever's in that road is going to end up going down the stormwater drain and then right into the pond. I like the directionally challenged sprinklers. And somebody's gotten ahead of me. So yeah, exactly. This is running off and it's got contaminants in it now, and it goes into that pipe, into the pond. And we've already discussed most of these do not have any filter on them. The pipe from the road to the pond, it goes straight in. The other issue that somebody already got ahead of me on is, yes, if it's reclaimed water, it's even worse. Not only is it picking up everything off of the road, but now we have nutrients in the water itself. It comes to you with nutrients in it, that reclaimed water. I can only tell you what Manatee County's reclaimed water loads are, but you can find out from your reclaimed water facility what their loads are. And so in Manatee County, we average in the dry season nitrogen about 7 milligrams per liter, and in the wet season about 8 milligrams per liter. What does that mean to you? Well, we've done a little calculator. Sarasota County has one online. We've just done it on paper for folks that if you look at the graphic here, we've got your irrigation rate. So if you're applying a 1/2 inch to 1 inch, this is how much nitrogen you're getting. So once a week, if you apply 1/2 inch of irrigation water, and you can find that out by using your little rain gauges, if you or tuna fish cans, or whatever you use. So one time a week, a 1/2 inch will give you just under a pound of nitrogen a year. If you're irrigating twice a week and you've got 1/2 inch to 1 inch, you could cut your nitrogen in half, or maybe all the way out. Our fertilizer ordinance only allows 4 pounds of nitrogen a year. And if you're irrigating 1 inch twice a week with our reclaimed water, you're getting almost 4 pounds of nitrogen in that water. So you can reduce your fertilization or cut it out completely, depending on how much you're watering. That's really important because number one, the runoff, if we're overwatering, all of that nitrogen is ending up in our stormwater ponds. And number two, if we're putting fertilizer in on top of the nutrient in the water, that's just more nutrient that's going to end up in the pond. Okay. So everyone in the community should keep your mind on the gutter, right? Or as Pinellas County says, Lara up there says, keep your mind in the gutter. So we definitely should be paying attention to what's going down our gutter, where it's going, our gutter system, and then down into the stormwater drains. So things like leaf litter. Leaf litter contains those nutrients as well. Nitrogen and phosphorus are present in leaf litter. So we need to be mindful that we collect that before it ends up into our stormwater and into the ponds. Trash is another thing that we don't want in our ponds. And I'm not sure what this chemical is here. It could be a lot of things, but we don't want it going down the drain. We say only let rain go down the drain, right? So we want to try to prevent that as much as possible. And that comes to the number 8, reduce stormwater runoff. And so again, if we can reduce it by adjusting our irrigation systems to put down the right amount of water, by looking at where the stormwater runoff is coming off of our own property, directing those downspouts into the landscape or non-porous surfaces, trying to incorporate rain barrels or other things to collect that, reducing the amount of fertilizer and pesticides and all that can be carried off of our property, then we can help protect that stormwater pond. So this is a picture. You can see those little blue granules there. That's fertilizer after it had just been fertilized. They use a spreader and they use a deflector shield. The deflector shield unfortunately drops a lot right on the edge. And so you can see all of that. This is a curb right here for the road. And all of that's just waiting for some water to head south, right? To head on down the drain. So we need to be very mindful of that so that doesn't happen. Here's another one. This is down the street from me. Unfortunately, this is a heavily trafficked road. It doesn't look like it at the time, but I sat there for 30 minutes this morning. So this road, because it's got high traffic, the maintenance folks are not required to get in the road and blow back the grass clippings. So they also don't blow them off of the sidewalk, which is not proper. And so when it rains, all those grass clippings get caught in the water and head down to the stormwater drains. So we want to be mindful of that. The other one is when we're maintaining around our stormwater ponds like this. look at all these grass clippings. So what happened is they let the grass grow high, probably because it was wet and they didn't want to get in it because mowers can slide in, mowers can fall in. And so they waited a bit to mow that or string trim around the pond. And so now you have big globs of grass clippings. And so where are those going to go? Right here. And that's where they're going to go, into the pond. And you can see right here is where I was, and there they are there too. And in a very short time, this is what we have. It just feeds the algae that's there. Algae is present. When we feed it, then it grows. So number 9 principle that I want to address is protecting the waterfront. So not only do we need to get the right plants in our landscape so we don't need a lot of resources that can end up in the pond, we also want to reduce and monitor our irrigation to make sure we're only applying what we need and be very careful with reclaimed water. We want to make sure the stormwater runoff coming off of our site is as clean as it can be. And we want to protect the waterfront. One of the ways that we do that is a 10-foot, and this is maintenance-free zone. Maintenance-free. Some fertilizer ordinances around the state have adopted language. I know in Manatee County and in Pinellas County, there's language that we should have a 6-foot maintenance-free zone. That means around ponds for 6 foot from the top of bank is what they're calling it. There should not be mowing. There should not be fertilization, of course. There should not be weed eating. It should be maintenance free. So how do we achieve that? Well, let's talk about why we want to do that first. We want to do that to help prevent all of those grass clippings from getting into the water. We want to create zones that help protect the shoreline, help protect the pond, instead of contribute to problems in those areas. So we fortunately have that community I talked about earlier, Lakewood Ranch, who was very helpful and funded some plantings in their community. And then Manatee County also funded some communities on county ponds. So we had 2 different places to look. We did 6 ponds in Lakewood Ranch with a smaller plantings, so only about 10 to 25% of the shoreline was planted. And in the Manatee County ponds, we've planted 75%. So I'm going to show you what this can look like. Oh, and somebody's corrected me that Pinellas's code is 10 foot. It's 10 foot for fertilizer, and that's across the state if you're not using a deflective shield. But for mowing, it's typically listed as 6 feet is what most of the ordinances say. And that's consistent with Manatee County. So what some people do is they do what's in this drawing here, a no-mow zone. They just stop mowing the turf up next to the bank and let it grow in. And that can be a temporary fix. It can be a short-term solution. The problem with that is invasive plants end up getting into this area and it becomes a seed bank for invasive plants. So we are really recommending that you look more towards plants to accomplish this. And here's an example of one of the plantings that we did in Lakewood Ranch. Here's another example. So 6 feet is what we're looking for. But remember that we need to maintain Florida friendly to be able to protect our ponds. So let's talk about these buffer zones that I want to emphasize here for the last couple of minutes. We're going to talk about 2 different types of buffer zones. There's the littoral zone, which consists of the plants in the water. So these are all going to be aquatic plants. But then we also have a shoreline buffer zone, or a land side on the land part, not in the water, that we're going to be discussing. We have some publications that have great recommendations of plants that can be utilized in both of these areas. So we can provide that to you. I'm going to give you a resource at the end that has all the resources I'm talking about today located in one spot for you. We even have some designs that you can use. Gail Hansen, one of our very talented professors who is does landscape architecture, helped with these designs. We did research in a couple communities, to find out what they would like to see and what types of plants they would like to see. And from that, they created these designs. So they can start the designs with very low ground covery type designs, so that folks that are afraid it's going to cover up the water view can rest assured that it would not. And then she's got a no-mow design here, but she also has some designs for even larger plant material if that's the look that you would like to see. So here's one of the ponds that we did out in the Lakewood Ranch community. You can see the one thing I want you to focus on is right behind, this is Dr. Mary Lusk here. That's a sign right there, okay? So you see that sign in this picture, and over here you can see that same sign. This was the winter when we were out, so this is a very low water level, which is a little misleading, but you can see a big difference in the shoreline here. So this was a few months after the shoreline was planted, and this was about a year after the shoreline was planted. We were out there doing some water testing to see if there was a benefit to any of this. We did see a reduction in phosphorus. We also learned a best management practice. See this little strip of turf right here? That was the maintenance committee, the maintenance folks. They wanted to keep that strip of turf because they were afraid that mulch would fall into the pond. Well, we recommend using pine straw mulch that would mat down. And so that pine straw mulch mats down and it doesn't move like chipped wood mulch would. But this little strip of turf here became problematic. Again, it was, invasive weeds got in there and it became a seed bank. So we don't recommend putting that in. And we learned our lesson here. Yes, lots of milkweed. There are some plants in this photo that we did not agree with. Again, the community was very kind to pay for and install all the plants. And so they selected the plants. We did make recommendations, but not all of them were taken. This one, however, is Manatee County, and it was one we had a lot more control over. So this is along a very busy roadway in front of our convention center. We planted lots of natives. This one we planted for more colorful landscape. So it's got lots of beach sunflower, there's gaillardia, there's some firebush in there, there's some native porterweed in there. There's lots of stuff in there growing. And this one was more of a natural look that we were trying to achieve. Again, at one of our county ponds, this is muley grass in its height of beauty, right? The beautiful pink seed heads that come on muley grass. There's other grasses in there. There's some dwarf Fakahatchee grass, there's some cord grass, but a number of grasses. And what I'm trying to show you is that this look doesn't have to be one look. There's lots of ways that your pond can look. We're trying very hard to plant ponds so we can get more examples of how they can look. Here's another one. This is a different one at the convention center where, again, we went with more just greens. Some places like it more to be just green, not as many flowers. We also have the option with more flowers. So when we're talking about flowers, there's lots of color that you can use. Pickler weed has pretty purple flowers, blue flag iris, duck potato with its little white flowers. Canna lilies, another one that can be used with some flowers. So we have jointed spike rush. It is another one. I would say with jointed spike rush, a lot of times I go out to a pond and that's all we see left is jointed spike rush. It's a really hardy plant. It can survive a lot. So be cautious in the amount that you use. It's a great plant by all means, but diversity is good. It's always good. And I believe the story in this particular pond is that there was an overuse of herbicide, and the spike rush could handle a little more herbicide than some of the other aquatic plants could, so it killed them off. But hey, they still have aquatic plants, so everything's still good, right? Unfortunately not. Okay, water lilies is one that is great, but if we get too many in the pond, it starts to impede that surface view with the reflections, and folks don't like that. So water lilies are great, but we need to maintain them. Like anything else, there's a maintenance component to plants. It's not a silver bullet fix for ponds for sure. Here's that milkweed that I saw some folks were commenting about again. I need to say we weren't privy to the plant selections. Here's another example of some color. Porterweed, flax lily, muhly grass utilized, ornamental grasses, just lots of different looks that can be used. Okay, so here's my contact information, and I'll put that in the chat, my email address, and you're welcome to email me. But I do want to show you this, and I'm going to copy the address and put it in the, oh, I think I'm going to, there we go. I'm going to copy this address and put it into the chat box so you have access to it, and then we're going to go there. Okay, so this is the site that we created in response to a lot of people having a lot of questions about stormwater ponds. So in this website, you can tell us about your pond. There's a little survey that you can conduct about your pond. Where should I start? I have some fact sheets on working in communities and the steps that you should take when you're starting a project like this. The very first thing is to contact your pond maintenance and landscape maintenance folks. They need to have a conversation with you, because any changes like this may change their contract. And so they may want to charge you more for doing something like this, or, you know, they may say we can't maintain that way. So you need to have that conversation with them. I'm not saying that either one of those are the right answers on their side. I'm just saying that this can happen. And so before you even get started, have that conversation with them. But the steps on you know, plant selections and going to the board and making sure that you have money not to just install the plants, but the maintenance part of the plants too. And then there's some other pages here. There's some videos where, oh, it's going to take a minute to load, of course, some videos that we have on green infrastructure, talking about ponds and how things get transported there. I have a presentation similar to the one that I'm doing today here that we're going to replace with today's soon. So look for that. And then there's a resource page, and there's lots and lots of resources here. So I was talking about the designs that Gail Hansen did. That is right here, the guide to selection and installation of stormwater pond plants. But lots and lots of information you can find here on aeration, you know, midges. We have a midge problem occasionally here. So lots and lots of information here that you can find, including, and this is more for Manatee County, but I'm sure you have others in your area as well. Estuary programs can often provide money for communities to do projects like this. Our Native Plant Society will fund some of these projects. A lot of times it's matching funds that they're looking for, but hey, something, you know, is better than nothing. So there are often resources out there for you to get started. So I'm going to put my contact information back up here. So if you want to get a hold of me, you're welcome to, and then we'll start answering questions. So.
Okay, great. Wonderful presentation, Michelle. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A couple of questions. At what point should I worry when cattails start to appear along the shoreline?
So cattails are native, but they're very aggressive, right? So just be careful that we're not calling them invasive, because they're not invasive. They're just very aggressive. And so they can take over. We know that they like sunny areas. So if you don't have shade on your pond, then that can be, you know, encourage them to be more prolific. I will be honest, cattails are so aggressive that we typically don't recommend cattails. If you already have them, you'll just have to look at the maintenance costs of keeping them to where you want them in the pond. Yeah, cattails can mean high nutrients. They do take up a lot of nutrients, which is a good thing, but they also need to be removed to remove those nutrients, because they store them and then they die back. And when they die back, all those nutrients get released again. So, removing cattails is not a bad thing. It helps get some of those nutrients out of the pond. So I don't know if that was helpful to you. I don't know that there's a cut and dry, but they are a lot of maintenance. And so if you don't have the money to keep them maintained where you want them, then removal is a better option for you, and replace them though with something that you can enjoy.
Great, thank you. Can you expand on the Southwest Florida water management requirement of littorals? The builder of our community and the CDD have not planted, and now we have a serious erosion problem.
Yeah, that is common. And I would love for you to talk to the Water Management District about that, because I feel like the more they hear about this, the more they're going to look at putting or enforcing the pond plants back in there again. So the permits all say, and I have the language, the permits all still reference that littoral shelf and plants, and 85% of the 30% being planted. Unfortunately, it's just not being enforced. There's some information out there that says that residency time helps with the nutrient or the pollution falling out. So they are exchanging that littoral shelf for deeper storage, longer residency time. And so unfortunately, deeper ponds often will erode even more quickly because, there's not as much of a gentle slope. And so it erodes and fills in that way. The language is there, it's just not being enforced. And so you're not going to be able to call the Water Management District and say, hey, my developer didn't put this in. You just need to get involved with your community and try to encourage them. We have IFAS offices in every county. If you don't have somebody that can talk about stormwater ponds, then we'll help them. There's the state office, there's other agents around that are more familiar with stormwater ponds, and we'll help them. We can help with that community and see if we can, put on a presentation like this for the community to say why it's valuable. Because yes, erosion is going to happen if there's not anything put in place to stop it.
I think you may have answered this question before, but I wanted to come back to it because I was a little confused about it. In many local ordinances, they suggest to have a 10-foot parentheses voluntary low maintenance zone, but usually they are not mandatory, which I thought many places had mandatory low maintenance zones.
So I think that we're really talking about maybe two different things. So one is the fertilizer law that's on the books that talks about the ring of responsibility, and that's a 10-foot zone where we're not supposed to be putting in fertilizer, right? So that 10-foot area, if you have a deflector shield, you can come into that area a little bit, but 10 foot is what we talk about. That is different than the no maintenance zones. So the no maintenance zones means no mowing, no string trimming. You shouldn't be in there doing really anything, because the encouragement is to have longer roots, and the way you get longer roots is to have taller shoots, right? So the taller the plant, the deeper the root. And so that's one of the reasons why they put those on the books. But we have been, using plants like ornamental plants, not just turf grass, in these areas, and we're seeing some really good benefits from that. We're seeing small water quality improvements, but erosion control is what we're really seeing from that. And then increased habitat for wildlife. We're noting how many birds and invertebrates and fish and all that we're seeing, and it's drastically improving as we put plants in.
Okay.
Does that make any more sense of that?
I think so. I would suggest that anybody thinking about doing anything in that zone would check their ordinances, their county or local ordinances, just to make sure they're doing the right thing. I think I'm thinking of fertilizer, where I've heard of 40-foot setbacks even in some counties.
Certainly, you have to follow your ordinances. And again, it can go across the gambit. I know I see a 3-foot reference in there. That's something that we're having some issues with, is 3 foot. Because again, it's just enough area to have some invasive weeds. It's just enough area to really upset people. We're finding more adoption to plants versus the no-mow zone. Homeowners will adopt the plant look more so than that no-mow zone. So that helps when your community is happy with the look instead of unhappy. Because again, I talked about how those homes all have windows across the backs of them. So it really upsets them if it's something that they don't like out there.
Right. Let me see here. Where are the courses available for FFL ponds?
So that is the state, and I had mentioned it was a different name, in case your pond maintenance professional says Healthy Ponds, that was its name. So now it's become Florida Friendly Ponds, and I believe
we're working on it.
They're working on a course.
Yes. So
you're on an email list. I'm sure you'll get notified when that.
Yes. Yeah, we're working on the courses right now. So it'll be Canvas, I believe.
Are you able to launch the survey? I see some people are asking.
It was launched. It should be in your browser.
Great.
It was launched at the beginning. Let's see. Can cypress trees be recommended?
So cypress trees are a very good plant. It depends on how you're maintaining around them. In wet areas, especially, cypress trees tend to expose their roots. Their roots come up even more so in wet areas than in drier areas, but they tend to do it in all areas. So if you're trying to mow around a cypress tree, it's not good for the tree and it's not good for your mower. But if you have plant beds in that area, then that's a great option. So cypress trees do a really good job of holding that shoreline in place.
Okay. Let's see here. Sorry, let me look here. Look under Q&A. Is there a statewide code or law for developers to have a stormwater treatment system in their new development plans? Not seeing this, seeing hard fill with which elevates the new homes and sends stormwater to flood other areas.
Okay, so I know we're talking to people across the state, and there's different slopes and distance from sea level and all. I know in our area we develop a little differently because we are wet all the time, and so we have to transfer the water. I know up in Gainesville you guys have more dry detention, so it's wet for a short period and then it infiltrates into the ground, hopefully. I hear what you're saying, but the water management districts, that it was part of their function is to require developers to keep a certain amount of stormwater on site. Again, they can't keep all of it on site because when we have these huge rain events, largely from tropical storms or hurricanes that come through, there's no way that you could keep all of it on site. But they are supposed to be engineered to keep a certain amount of it on site and treat it in ponds, dry or wet, or through wetland treatment, through rain gardening type things or swales. There's a lot of different ways to achieve treatment, but they are supposed to treat it prior to it being released off of that site and typically into another body of water. So if you're having a problem with that, I would suggest talking to your local building department. So if you're in the city or a county, go talk to the building department and ask them why that was allowed to happen, because that shouldn't have happened.
Okay, one more. What plants are good by cypress?
what plants are good by cypress. Well,
Yeah.
I would say the aquatic plants would be great in the water. And then up on the land, it depends on how big the tree is. If you have an old tree that's been there for years and years, it's very densely shaded. You don't really need to put anything up under all those root systems. But if you've just planted a cypress, you're going to need some kind of ground cover to keep the weeds from getting established there. So we would suggest some ground covers, and that design guide recommends quite a few ground covers that would work well in that area. It depends on your zone, but a ground cover to keep weeds suppressed until the tree gets big enough to shade, and then it'll eventually take over the area with dense shade and pine or cypress droppings. It'll mulch itself.
Great. I think that is all. One thing I wanted to mention is Brooke Moffis said a lot of good information. Have you produced an EDIS pub yet? And would you be willing to share a scripted PowerPoint? So get a hold of Brooke.
I will, and we are working on some EDIS publications. That's a fun process, but
yeah,
we are working on some. I do have the fact sheets that you're welcome to use. They have been reviewed by the researchers that I work with. And I don't have the scripted, Brooke, but I could work on that and see if we could get it scripted for you.
And also this presentation will be linked to the FFL YouTube account, which you can get to through YouTube or through our webpage under resources. So Brooke, if you have questions about that, let me know. And I think that's it. Michelle, thank you so much for talking to us about this. I know it's a complicated subject. And people always have questions about it, especially in HOAs. So we thank you very much for coming on today.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for
having
me. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. So everybody have a great day. Please take the survey. It should have popped up in your browser. And we will see you next month with ethnobotany. Thank you.